Okay, it's 12:10, so we will begin. Welcome, everyone. My name is Judith Davidson, and I'm a psychologist in the area of sleep. I'm a professor at Queen's University. One of the things I do is to supervise graduate students at Queen's in something called the Psychology Clinic at Queen's. So this place here has different services, and I just wanted to let you know, in case you didn't know about this clinic at Queen's, it's a community service. It's for people in the community, very reasonable fees, and for both children and adults. And if you want to learn more about what's offered there, just search for the Psychology Clinic at Queen's, and there's a website that will describe all the services. So that's one of the things I do. What I'm going to be talking about here today is taking care of your sleep. And I'm going to keep this talk portion quite short because I really want to hear your questions. And we've left about 15 to 20 minutes at the end just for questions and answers. So I'm really looking forward to your questions. So I'll explain in a minute how to send in your questions. So the topic is our sleep and how it's changed for many people over the past year during the pandemic, and what to do if your sleep is off track. I'm going to start by reviewing some of the basic systems that control our sleep and our wakefulness so that we can have an understanding of normal sleep, how it can go off course, and then how to improve it. And we'll be focusing on the sleep problems that many are having right now. And very briefly at the end, we'll touch on the sleep disorder of chronic insomnia. So to let you know that this session will be recorded, and then it's going to be posted on the Facebook page for the Psychology Clinic at Queen's so that you can watch it again or you can share it with others. The questions that I was mentioning will be towards the second half of the presentation, and I would ask that you use the Q&A button that's at the bottom of your screen to send the questions to Maeve, who's helping with this, and not to use the chat, but rather to use the question and answer button to send your questions in, and then she's going to let me know what those questions are one at a time later on. And I want to thank Maeve for the technical organization of this session. I also want to thank Melody, who was posting the information on Facebook, and also to thank Dr. Tess Clifford, who's the director of the whole clinic. This presentation is provided for free by the Psychology Clinic at Queen's, thanks to the Government of Canada's Emergency Community Support Fund and Community Foundations of Canada. So, with the pandemic, many people's sleep has been altered. Here are some of the main things that I've been hearing and that I've seen in recent Canadian research. People are having trouble falling asleep. They're waking up in the night. They're perhaps sleeping longer than usual. They're staying up later. They're experiencing more dreaming. And some people are having a hard time getting up in the morning. If you've experienced something else, I'd be very happy to hear about that when we chat later, when we do the questions and answers. But those are the main things I've been hearing and that have been in the research. Now, in terms of getting to sleep, trouble getting to sleep and trouble staying asleep, I'm going to just show you this. This is from the newspaper almost a year ago. It was about Dr. Bonnie Henry, and you might recognize her. She's the BC's health officer. And this is from last spring. She says, "I don't think I slept at all." And this is in relation to the first 24 hours of the pandemic, when she had to consider a lot of incoming data. She had to plan, she had to make decisions that would affect many people's lives. So why are we not surprised that she couldn't sleep during that time? Well, we all know intuitively that sleep is easily overridden when we have important things to work out, when we have to escape danger at night, for instance, in times of war, when we have to make important decisions. So that makes sense that our sleep system is very easily disrupted when we have to we have important things to look after and anything to do with our safety. Now this is a study that was done at the University of Ottawa and some other universities last spring, April and June 2020, and there were more than 5,000 adults in Canada who were surveyed about their sleep since the pandemic. And some of the main findings were that a lot of people had delayed wake-up times, so they're waking up much later in the morning than they usually did. 6% actually reported better sleep during the pandemic. 18% reported worsened sleep, and 40% had an increase in insomnia symptoms. So that's quite a large proportion of people had more insomnia symptoms. And we'll explain what insomnia is in a bit. So if you had any sleep problems when the pandemic started, or you're having sleep problems now, you're definitely not alone. Now, some people's sleep has gotten back to normal, a new normal, and some people are still, depending on your situation, of course, you may still be having sleep problems depending on the stressors in your life. Now, just to back up a minute, sleep is considered now, it's recognized as one of the 3 pillars of health. We've all heard about how exercise is so important, daily exercise, and nutrition is important for our health, but now we know just how important sleep is to maintain our health. Now, for this presentation, I'm going to assume that you're all getting lots of exercise and you're eating really good diets so that those 2 things are taken care of, and we'll just focus on the sleep component. So why is sleep important? Why is healthy sleep important? Well, you probably know it's helpful. It's part of our physical health. And what we know from studies when people don't get enough sleep is that they have an increased risk of heart disease. So we know it's involved in our cardiovascular system and keeping that healthy. We know that when people don't get enough sleep, they have an increased risk of type 2 diabetes. So their glucose metabolism is worsened with ongoing sleep problems. And we're also more likely to gain weight when we're not getting enough sleep, which is a little bit counterintuitive because you'd think if you were staying up more, you would burn more calories. But no, in fact, when you get shorter sleep, you're more likely to put on weight. And that's believed to be due to the hormones that control appetite. There's one called ghrelin, which makes us eat more, and that goes up when we're not sleeping enough. So sleep is important for our physical health. Those are some of the main ones. Now, mental health. So this is where you see the really big changes, where you feel the really big changes when you haven't slept enough. And mood. Sleep is really important for our mood. And that's the first thing we notice, isn't it, when we haven't slept well? We become grouchy. We're irritable. Things feel a lot harder to do. So it's really important for our mood regulation to have healthy sleep. Also, sleep allows us to focus our attention better, to have faster reaction time. It's important for memory consolidation. And in general, we're better able to handle the various stressors that we face from day to day when we've had good sleep. Now, how much sleep do we need? People often wonder this. Here's a graph, and along the bottom here are different age groups from when we're newborn to when we're an older adult. And this is number of hours of sleep. These are the recommendations. And you can see that as we get older, we get less and less sleep. That's normal. So if we're down here in this age group and we expect to get the same amount of sleep that we did a few decades ago, we're going to be disappointed because usually our sleep duration goes down. So the amount of sleep we need depends on our age to a large extent, but it also depends on our own unique circumstances and physiology. So there's a great individual variation in the amount of sleep we need. And only you can really say how much you need. Now, this is the recommendations for most adults. It's about 7 to 9 hours in the dark blue, but you can see in the turquoise, these are still normal amounts as well. Some people need 6, some people might even need 11, and that's completely normal. It just that there's fewer of those people, but it's not abnormal. So we need to get away from the idea or the myth that we might have heard growing up that we all need 8 hours of sleep a night, because it's just a myth. It's a very individual thing. So the amount you need, how do you determine the amount that you need? Well, you have to consider your age, but also you want to just see how rested you are each day. So if you're sleeping and you're waking up and you feel rested during the day, you're not falling asleep during the day, you feel rested, that's the simple answer. That's how much sleep you need. And it might be 7 for one person, it might be 10 for another, and it might be 3 for someone else. The average in Canada is just over 7 hours, but that's just an average. Again, it's very individual. So, and also it's dependent on where you are right now. I mean, right now in your life, it might be different from 3 years ago. It might be different still 5 years from now. Now, this is the most sciencey part that that I'll get into here, but I think it's really important that we understand this, that we all have 2 biological rhythms inside us that regulate our sleep and wakefulness. And they're so important. They can help us predict when we're not going to sleep well and when we're going to sleep well. So we can harness these if we're not sleeping well to make sure that they're working for us naturally. And there's 2 biological rhythms. So along here is the time of day. So this is 7 in the morning, this is 11 at night. And on these axes here is the amount of sleep pressure. So how likely we are to fall asleep quickly and get a good sleep. So one of these, the top one, it's one, this one, it's one that builds up the longer we've been awake. So when we wake up in the morning, it builds up, builds up, builds up, and then it drops off when we sleep. Builds up the next day, drops off when we fall asleep. In that way, it's kind of like hunger. So the longer it's been in general since we last ate a meal, the more our hunger tends to build up. So sleep is exactly the same. So there's that process that builds up. Then there's a second process that's called a circadian process, which is a 24-hour process. And you may have heard about circadian rhythms. It just means it increases and decreases within 24 hours, and it repeats every 24 hours. And all living things, plants and animals, have these rhythms that are linked to the light-dark cycle on Earth. So because of the cycle, because of Earth's rotation. So many of our hormones rise and fall within 24 hours. Our body temperature rhythm rises and falls within 24 hours. And everything is linked basically to the light and dark patterns. And so sleep also has this circadian rhythm where it's high at night, it goes down during the day, and then it rises again at night. So we get a really good sleep when we're sleeping, when both of these processes are high. So when we've had a long time since we last slept, and when the circadian rhythm is peaking for our sleep, then we get a really good sleep. And those things operate really well, give us great sleep if they're not interfered with by stress, caffeine, thinking, going to another time zone, things like that. So just wanted to show you those because they can really help us understand how we can improve our sleep when it goes off track. These are the two processes again, superimposed on each other. And I just want to draw your attention to the circadian one, which is going up and down. It repeats every 24 hours. And so it's high when we're sleeping at night. Then in the morning, it goes down. During the afternoon, we're likely to be awake, so not sleeping. And then it rises again at night, so it goes up and down. So we're very likely, we're meant to sleep at night and be awake when it's bright light, when there's bright light. There's other things in our environment and things we can do to stabilize the circadian rhythm. So, for instance, we know that if we get up, like if we wake up and get out of bed at the same time every day of the week, 7 days a week, this rhythm gets very strong and regular and really helps us to get good sleep. So that's one thing we can do to strengthen that rhythm. The other thing is light and dark exposure, which I've just referred to, and keeping things regular, like having constant rise times, constant bed times, constant meal times. Our body likes rhythms, so that rhythm will be very strong for our sleep if everything else is regular. This is the rhythm that gets thrown off when we go to another time zone, where we suddenly fly into another time zone and the light-dark patterns are different from where we're coming from. Or when we're doing shift work and we have to be awake all night. So this is where we really notice this rhythm here, because it'll be off kilter in those situations. The other thing that's happened just during the pandemic, when people are sleeping later, what happens when we sleep in is this rhythm here gets shifted later. So it gets shifted to the right. So then it's harder to wake up in the morning because our body isn't, I guess that would be here, our body isn't ready to wake up yet. So that's another way it comes into play during this COVID time. So this is when we're meant to be awake, wide awake. And this is when we're meant to be getting ready to go to bed. We're designed to be in sync with that. Now, just a few words about sleep stages. You may already know that we go through a number of stages during sleep, characterized by the brain waves. And these are brain waves of the different stages. So we go from wake to stage 1, which is light sleep, and then stage 2, and then deep sleep, which is stages 3 and 4, and then REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. And we basically go through them in this order. And you can see that what happens when we're awake is our brain activity, there's a lot of fast activity. And then as we fall asleep, the waves get bigger and slower. So when we're in deep sleep, we have these nice, big, slow waves. And this type of sleep is thought to be most restorative for our bodies. And then when we go into REM, you notice the complete change of the brain waves. Now it's kind of almost like being awake again. Lots of brain activity happening in REM. This is when most of our dreaming happens. And this stage we know now is involved in memory consolidation. It's also involved in adapting to new situations, new learning, consolidating learning, and also emotional processing. Now, we need all these stages for all the mental things and all our physical things, but REM is a unique stage, and it's so unique. Well, I guess that's an oxymoron to be so unique. It's unique. So the other stages are called non-REM because they're not REM. So there's really 3 main states to sleep and wakefulness: awake, non-REM, and REM sleep. So when we go down through these stages, that's just one cycle. We don't just go down through them and then wake up and start the day. No, we go down through them, and then it's normal to have a little bit of an awakening and go back down again through these stages, have a bit of an awakening, go back down. So we may have 4 or 5 cycles of these stages. And this is showing an example over the night of somebody's sleep. So this is the time of day, and these are the different sleep stages here. So this person has 5 sleep cycles, and they're awake, and then they go into stage 1, 2, 3, 4. And you see this is 3 and 4 here. They have a lot of deep sleep at the beginning of the night. Then they have a little bit of REM sleep. So they put REM sleep up here in the red because it's so different from all the other stages. And then we go down again into deep sleep and then up to have a bit of REM. Notice here's a little awakening, completely normal. And then we go back down, deep sleep, REM, little bit of deep sleep here, REM, awakening to REM. So the things I want you to notice about this are that it's completely normal to have 2 to 4 awakenings a night, because it's natural to wake up between these cycles. And often we don't even notice it, and we just roll over and we go into another cycle. But if you wake up, that many times and you become concerned about it, and these awakenings get longer, then it might become an issue. But just waking up itself several times a night is not abnormal. So that's not something to worry about. The other thing I want to show you is that as the night goes on, you can see we spend a lot of time here at the beginning of the night in deep sleep. So our body tries to get deep sleep as much as possible at the beginning of the night. And then you can see, by contrast, that the amount of REM increases through the night. So most of our REM sleep is near the end of the night, the last third of the night. And when we wake up, it's likely to be from stage 2 or from REM sleep, which are easier stages to wake up from. So if we're getting a lot of, let's say we're sleeping more with the pandemic, we are more likely to be waking up from REM sleep, which is a dreaming state. We're more likely to be remembering dreams. So, people are saying, I'm having so much dreaming. And it's because of this. We're just getting more sleep, and we're more likely to wake up and remember the dream that we woke up from. All right. So I've shown you a little bit of some of the reasonings or the biology behind why there might be trouble falling asleep, like with that hyperarousal, with the Bonnie Henry thing, with worries. Waking up in the night being normal, but sometimes prolonged when we then start to worry about the waking up in the night, sleeping longer than usual, staying up later, having more dreaming, and finding it hard to get up in the morning with that circadian rhythm being pushed. So with that, I'm going to now go on to what to do. So what do I do now that I understand what might be happening? So just to summarize some of the tips, and we have sent you out this a handout that goes through these tips, so you can put it on your fridge or something just to remind yourself of these sleep tips, but they're all based on what I've just gone over. So the first one is to keep your routines in place. So that's really, really helpful for sleep, as we've seen. So getting up at the same time every day, we know helps keep sleep healthy. So that includes weekends. So if you're used to sleeping in on weekends, maybe try just for a while getting up at the same time 7 days a week. And then I'll bet you your body adjusts to that and really likes waking up at that time. So now you have newfound time, on Saturday and Sunday morning. Anyway, try it out. Having a regular bedtime helps. Regular meal times also help because our body recognizes those rhythms. So that will help our sleep. Don't try to sleep. So sleep is something that comes when we're open to it, but not when we're on a mission to find it. It's kind of like happiness that way. So don't go looking for it. Don't put pressure on yourself to achieve it. Just make the circumstances right for it to happen and see if it happens. So don't try to sleep, because that just pushes it away. Know that it's normal to have some sleep difficulty some of the time. You're not alone, and remove any musts related to sleep. So no pressure on yourself. If you're not sleeping, get out of bed and go to another room and do something else and return when you're sleepy. This is because when we've had bad sleep in the same bed, in the same room for many nights in a row, our body comes to associate the bed in the bedroom with bad sleep. So we go into the bedroom the next night and our brain goes, okay, now it's time to wake up and be wide awake. So you want to break that by only sleeping in your bed, getting out of bed when you're not sleeping. Be aware of 24-hour natural light patterns, as we've talked about. If you want to help yourself get up in the morning to feel wide awake, then bright light in the morning. Turn on your lights at home if it's still dark outside. Have relatively dim light in the evening so your body knows the difference between the morning and the evening. Give your brain a break. Stop working several hours before bed. With the pandemic, we've been working from home, a lot of us, and our home life is blending into our work life and our everything else. So make a clear distinction between your work and your time to unwind in the evening. Turn off electronics, the TV, at least 1 hour before bedtime. And you can do something like a jigsaw puzzle. That's kind of nice for our brains at that point rather than being on a screen. Now, deal with worries, because worries will keep us awake. And I like to separate worries into those under my control and those not under my control. So an example of ones under our control would be well, for me, let's say it's a report that's not finished, cleaning that needs to be done, what I regretted saying to my brother on the phone today. I don't have a brother, but let's say I did. So those are examples of things under my control. I can come up with some kind of solution if I think about it. Those outside my control would be, what are the mortgage rates going to be like 5 years from now? Will COVID-19 still be with us at Christmas time? Like, those are things like no one can say exactly, and I can't control them. What I'm suggesting for those under your control is something we call clear your head time. So that's writing down, taking time in the evening to write down all the things, the worries that might be on your mind, and finding a temporary solution for them just for the night. So it might be as simple as, I'm going to call my brother again at noon tomorrow, or I'm going to do that cleaning on Saturday at 8 o'clock in the morning, whatever. So you find a temporary solution. It might be even something like, I'm not going to worry about that tonight because I can't do anything about it tonight. So I'm just going to write that down, that I've addressed it for the night, and I'm going to put it away. Those outside your control. So these are ones that are better addressed by letting them go, aren't they, really? Rather than getting into them, because we just stew if we just keep trying to solve an unsolvable problem. So I would suggest floating them away. So putting them in a bubble, letting them go, putting them on a shelf in a box in our mind's eye, and putting it away in a closet, just using our imagery, our visual imagery, to let go of the concern for the night. The other thing is just managing stress in general. So I have simplify, which I really like that. Simplify, drop stuff. I really like. I put in delegate when I was making this, and I thought, who are we going to delegate to? There's no one really to delegate to. I mean, the only ones around are my cats, and they're not very helpful at anything. So if you can't delegate, don't worry about it. But simplify, drop things. Relaxation, meditation. There's lots of ways to learn these things. Watch your alcohol consumption. We know from that Canadian study that I cited at the beginning that there was an increase in use of alcohol during COVID-19, and that increase was associated with more sleep problems. So just keep an eye on that, because alcohol does really, it does really negatively affect our sleep. I mean, it might help us fall asleep, but it disrupts our sleep later in the night. Keep in touch with supportive others. It's so important, even though we can't see people in person, that we keep in touch with other people to manage our stress. And reach out if you are under a lot of stress. As I said, the psychology clinic at Queen's does have some services to help individuals get through stressful situations. Just a couple of words about insomnia. So what I've gone through is sleep disorders or sleep disruption that happens naturally when we have stressors like this pandemic. What this is, insomnia, is slightly different because it's more severe. It's a sleep disorder called insomnia. And there's many different sleep disorders, but this one is defined as difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. And it's happening at least 3 nights a week. And it's severe enough that it's really causing problems in your mood, your functioning, your ability to work, your ability to get things done, and really interfering with your life. That's insomnia. And chronic insomnia is defined as insomnia that's been going on for at least 3 months. So this now is a sleep disorder that might need more than the sleep tips I've just gone over. And just to let you know that there is treatment available, the best treatment that we know above and beyond sleeping medication is something called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI. And you can get information about insomnia and its treatment at this Canadian website that's run by a colleague of mine at Dalhousie, mysleepwell.ca, and it's got resources for you. And you can learn more about that if that applies to you. That's my website. You can get information about CBTI there. And our clinic, as I said at Queen at the beginning, we have a sleep therapy service that helps people with insomnia at the Queen's Psychology Clinic. More information about sleep for Canadians in general. So this has lots of good information in both French and English, sleeponitcanada.ca. And that's by Canadian researchers and clinicians. So it's all really solid information. All right, so I've gone through some of the things that happen to our sleep with COVID, some of the reasons why that might be happening, some tips, and you've got that handout now in your email that has those tips. I've defined what chronic insomnia is and where to get more information. So now I really want to address your questions, because I know people usually have things that I haven't answered. So I'm very happy to take any questions now. We have more than 15 minutes for that.
It looks like we have 2 questions here that have been sent in so far. So the first one that came through, I'll just read it out. So I wear my Fitbit to bed in order to keep track of sleep stages. It claims to measure light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep, as well as times and duration of wakefulness during the night. So then the question, does the Fitbit accurately measure our sleep stages?
That's a really good question. And the short answer is no. So Fitbits are getting better at getting ideas about our sleep, certainly about when we're still and when we're moving during sleep, which in a very rough way correlates with REM sleep and non-REM sleep, but it does not have the ability to distinguish sleep stages in the traditional way that we do in sleep labs. So they don't map on to each other. The Fitbits are really good at helping us make sure we're getting enough time in bed for our sleep, that we're paying enough attention to sleep, but they're not telling us about sleep stages very much, because they tend to, especially if we have insomnia, anytime we're still in bed, it tends to think that we're asleep. And if you have insomnia and you're awake in bed and you're not moving, it's going to think you're asleep. So we don't use it at all in our clinic. We use something called sleep diaries, which are very reliable ways to look at your sleep. They don't tell the sleep stages, but you don't need to know the sleep stages. I mean, suffice it to say, no, it doesn't map onto sleep stages, but it can be helpful just to make sure you're getting enough time in bed for sleep. And the thing is just not to get too obsessed with the numbers there, because they're not the same as sleep stages as we know them.
Awesome. And so our second question to come through here. So this one, I think we touched on this one a little bit in the presentation. So is looking at technology at night bad for your sleep?
All right. So if you mean looking at technology, looking at screens, I would say in general, yes, just because of the light exposure. We went through, the effect of light and dark on our sleep system. So if we are wanting to sleep, we're wanting to be in dim light. So we don't want any kind of screen there. Now, it's especially the blue light that comes from screens that is most alerting. But some screens allow you to block out the blue light, which is better. But in general, I would say not to be on any technology, because not only the screens, but the stimulation, the mental stimulation that comes from even doing an email or, thinking about a puzzle or something, that can keep us alert as well and can interfere with sleep arriving.
Next, we have, it looks like a little bit more of a specific question about early morning wakefulness, or waking up early in the morning. So this person is saying they fall asleep well and generally get a good amount of time sleeping, but then there are times when they wake up around 3:30 to 4:30 in the morning and can't fall back to sleep. And then they feel a lot of tiredness in the afternoon. So is there anything they can do to help with that?
Yeah, that's not uncommon. Lots of things can contribute to that. And so it's hard to say in your particular situation what's contributing. It may just be that your body wants to wake up early and you've had enough sleep. And so it's just saying, okay, time to get up. But the fact that you're sleepy during the day indicates that maybe you're thinking you should be sleeping a bit longer. So part of it is just looking at how tired you are during the day, whether you're rested or not. Sometimes a lot of the time our body just needs a certain amount of sleep and we can't force it to get more than it's getting. So if the early morning awakening is bothering you and you'd rather wake up at like 6:30 or something, you could try staying up later at night, getting some light exposure at night to push that circadian rhythm later, so that you're falling asleep later and that you're sleeping later. But it would not give you more sleep. There's other things that can affect, that can cause early morning awakening, but it just depends on how much it's affecting you. And you can ask for help with that if it becomes an insomnia type problem. So if it's gone on for a long time, it's interfering with your functioning, then you could get help through CBTI. to help you sleep more consistently past that last awakening. So it just depends on the severity and how it's affecting you. Yeah, hopefully that gives you some idea.
Next, it looks like we've got a couple of questions about melatonin here. So one kind of asking how helpful is melatonin? And then another one, is it harmful to take melatonin on a regular basis?
So melatonin, as you probably know, you can buy in a drugstore or whatever. We all have natural melatonin. It's a hormone that it works on the circadian rhythm. You know, I showed you that 24-hour rhythm of sleep and wakefulness. It really, in our natural state inside, it controls that rhythm. And it responds to light. So that light dark thing that I was showing you, the 24-hour thing, that's all like melatonin is involved in that. So when we take external melatonin, like melatonin that's been synthesized, and we take it into our body, it might help us fall asleep a little bit sooner than we would otherwise. But the main thing it's doing, it's moving our circadian rhythm earlier. So the best use for melatonin is if we're working a night shift and we have to sleep during the day, we want our circadian rhythm to be moved earlier. So melatonin can be useful for some types of shift work. It could also be useful for preventing eastbound jet lag, because it's working with our circadian rhythm. So it's doing a whole lot more than just helping us fall asleep. And in terms of falling asleep, it can help us in the short term for a few nights, but it's been found not to be helpful for chronic insomnia, for that sleep disorder that goes on and on. People can take melatonin every night for years and still have chronic insomnia. So that's one question. So it's not helpful for chronic insomnia. It can be helpful in certain specific circumstances. You should know that it affects the circadian rhythm. And the thing about harmfulness, it's been found not to be especially detrimental, to be taken. It doesn't have the same type of side effects that you have with a prescribed sleeping pill. But that being said, if it's not doing anything, it's not helping, there's no point in taking it.
Next, it looks like we've got a few questions here related to exercise and sleep. So kind of centering on how important is exercise to sleep?
That's a great question. And I should have put that in one of the slides, because exercise is really good for our sleep when we're normally sleeping, when we're sleeping quite well on a usual basis. So when we get cardiovascular exercise on a regular basis, that can help deepen sleep. So it's just part of an all-round, like when we're exercising more, we tend to be sleeping better. But I want to make a distinction between that and if you have chronic insomnia. If you have chronic insomnia, exercise alone is not enough to reverse your insomnia. And we've seen many people in the clinic who are exercising all the time, and which is great, but they still have insomnia. So for like everyday life, it's good to get good nutrition. It's good to get regular cardiovascular and strength training exercises, and to get good sleep for everything to help everything else. Yeah, so you can't go wrong with exercise. Just don't expect it to reverse chronic insomnia if you've got a sleep disorder that is chronic insomnia.
Next, we've got a question here about COVID dreaming. So anything or any tips to manage dreams that are maybe kind of disturbing or distressing more so than usual?
Yeah, so we make a distinction between unpleasant dreams and nightmares. Nightmares are very, very disturbing. And those ones, you remember the dream vividly and you're very afraid to go back to sleep. It's horrifying and it really is very severe. We often get unpleasant dreams. In fact, when researchers who look at dreams, when they study dreams, they find that most of our dreams, like something like 2/3 of them, have kind of a negative emotional valence. So they're not neutral, they're not happy dreams, but they are kind of negative or frustrating or something like that. So if you have the nightmare type things, there are things that can be done to help with that. There's a technique called dream imagery rehearsal, which is rewriting the dream, if you remember it all, rewriting it so that you now have control over the dream and how it ends, and then rehearsing that. And that has been shown to reduce the frequency of those nightmares and also the intensity of them. If you're having dreams that are slightly unpleasant and frustrating, that's completely normal. Just know that, when you're getting more sleep during COVID, sometimes we just get more dreaming and we just are more aware of it. So thing is, if it's just unpleasant dreams, just know that that's normal and it's our brain's way of working through stuff. So I know for myself, I've had a lot of dreaming of frustrating dreams trying to get to lectures and being obstructed on the way and, trying to do things and everything gets in my way. And those are very frustrating, but I know that that's just me trying to, work out some things emotionally. So, yeah. So distinguish nightmares from just unpleasant dreams, and there's not much that you need to do for unpleasant dreams, but for the nightmares, there is this technique called dream imagery rehearsal.
We've got a ton of really great questions that have popped in. So I just want to firstly say I'm so sorry if we hit 1 o'clock and we're not able to quite get to everybody's questions. We've got a really good one here next about sleep and mental health. So given the link between sleep and mental health, is it better to address sleep issues or mental health problems first, or better to try and address them together as part of a kind of a comprehensive treatment plan?
Fantastic question. It doesn't really matter, I think it really depends on the person. Like if someone's coming in and saying, I am having problems sleeping and it's really bugging me, I'm also depressed and I'm also anxious, but not severely so, like I'm not suicidal or anything, then I would start with a sleep problem, because we know that when people's sleep improves, their mood improves as well. So you can kill two birds with one stone. That's a horrible expression. I love birds. Anyway, you can do two things at once by starting with the sleep problem, especially if the person's coming in with a sleep problem. If the person's coming in saying, I'm really anxious and I can't sleep, then I would start with the anxiety and then add in the sleep component.
You've got a really good little quick one here about how helpful is napping?
Great. I love napping for anybody. So our bodies, I don't have a slide for this, but our bodies, besides being predisposed to sleep when it's dark, when those two rhythms are high, There's also a time in the afternoon, like somewhere between 1 and 4 usually, where it's totally normal and natural. We're biologically predisposed to nap in that time zone. So I would say less than 45 minutes. So we know that naps that are about 30 minutes long in that zone restore our attention, our mood. They're very, very healthy. The thing is not to nap before that and after that and at weird times through the day, because that prevents one of those processes from building up, so we won't be sleeping at bedtime. But naps are great if they're kept short and they're in that time zone.
So we're just hitting 1 o'clock now. We do have a few more questions here that have been submitted, but I'll leave it up to you, Judith, if you'd like to answer another one or.
How many questions do we have left? Because I'm happy to stay for a few more minutes.
We've got a few here. So we've got a couple about medications. We've got one here about having a teenage child who's a night owl and how that may be affecting things. And then a couple here about someone who's been using trazodone and is hoping to get off that medication. And then we've got a couple here about supplements. So can things like St. John's wort or valerian be helpful with insomnia?
Okay. So why don't we take maybe 5 minutes to address some of these. So the first set was, there was something about trazodone, there's something about St. John's wort, and was there another medication?
A couple things. So St. John's wort, valerian, can that be helpful? The St. John's wort and then the trazodone are the main ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just quickly, a lot of the herbal medications have been found to not be effective for chronic insomnia. So again, going by the definition I gave you earlier, if you have chronic insomnia, it's probably not going to be helpful. And some of the herbal medications do have side effects, so they're not necessarily safe. So I would stay away from them. Trazodone now is actually an antidepressant that's sometimes prescribed by physicians in low doses for insomnia. It is not particularly helpful for chronic insomnia. It can help people sleep a little bit at first, but if it doesn't continue to help you sleep, then there are ways to slowly taper off the medication. The site that I had shown here, the My Sleep Well, that has information about how to come off medications, and you should know that certain medications, not so much trazodone, and not the herbal medications, but if you're on something like zopiclone or zolpidem, one of the benzodiazepine type medications, then it really is important to slowly come off the medication, not quickly. So I'm talking about weeks and months, because otherwise it's going to be very unpleasant in terms of withdrawal effects. But this site here can give you some guidance on that. There was a question then about someone staying up late at night?
Yeah, so someone mentions they've got a child who's a bit of a night owl and seems to have a circadian rhythm that's a bit different, and it isn't helpful with them trying to fall asleep. So will that kind of change naturally over time, or is there anything that can be done to help with that?
Okay, so that's I'm not sure how old the person is, but in adolescence, it's quite common for us to have delayed circadian rhythms. So it's often very, very common. You know, teenagers, they like being up all night, they like sleeping in. That's a biological thing that tends to happen at that age group, and it often comes back to adjust to what the rest of society does with time. But that being said, some people it stays later and they like it that way. If they like it that way, that's fine. If it's creating problems for that person, then the person can get help to move the whole rhythm earlier, but they have to be motivated to want to do that. And it's usually with light treatment. So exposure to bright light at certain times, it's a very carefully timed a protocol to move the rhythm earlier, but only if the person wants to do that because they're not able to get up for school or for work or something like that. And Maeve, I think there was one other area of questions.
Few more here. So we've got one mentioning about their sleep not being the same after being ill, after kind of going through sickness. Another one here about some suggestions for activities to do at night instead of technology. So we've still got a few that are popping in here in a few different areas, but
okay, so just maybe we'll take those two questions and then we'll call it a day. But I really appreciate the questions and having you attend this session. I'm sorry I can't see you directly, but I'm glad to see that there's been such a great turnout and some very interesting questions. So if you're ill and you develop sleep problems, that happens quite often. If it turns into chronic insomnia, then I would get help for chronic insomnia by looking at the resources that I've showed. It's quite common for any kind of major stress in our lives to precipitate a sleep problem that just keeps going for a while. So if it's gone on for 3 months at least and causing problems, then you can get help with CBTI. Activities instead of technology. Well, that's your imagination. I mean, the sky's the limit really on that. And it, like a lot of people who are helping people sleep, they say, well, you should do something quite quiet, and which is true, something quiet and not very alerting. But that being said, there's a range of things. I mean, some people, do baking, some people wash the dishes, some people fold laundry, some people do art projects, some people write letters, old-fashioned letters, it's just anything. And it's often good to think about the things you've always wanted to do but never thought you had time to do, and make a list of those things and get into them if you're not sleeping, and then just go back to bed when you're sleepy again. So they don't have to be really sedate activities. Okay, I think that is a summary of for that question. So probably that's all we have time for now because it's 8 minutes after. But thank you, everybody, and thank you, Maeve, for coordinating this.
thank you so much, Judith, for a wonderful presentation. It was amazing. And thank you again to everyone for your wonderful questions there towards the end as well. Apologies we couldn't get to everybody.
Bye-bye. Have a good day.